I still remember the day my world fell apart. My fiancée Sarah and I were supposed to get married in what should have been the happiest day of our lives. Instead, my brother Jake destroyed everything with his lies. He convinced Sarah I had cheated on her using fake evidence, and she believed him without giving me a chance to explain. Everyone turned against me. I thought my life was over until 3 years later when my sister called with news that would change everything. Before I continue this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the unbelievable ending to this betrayal that taught me who truly deserves a place in my life. I was 32 years old working as an architect at a successful firm in Boston. My life was on track, and I had everything I could ask for. I met Sarah at the local library 4 years ago. She was searching for children's books for her elementary school class. I was researching architectural designs for a new project. Our eyes met across the reading room, and I felt something I had never experienced before. It was not just attraction, but a sense of recognition, like I had known her my entire life. Sarah was 29 with warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. She taught 3rd grade at an elementary school downtown and had this natural way with children that amazed me. I pretended to need help finding education books just to talk to her. When she laughed at my obvious excuse, I knew I had to ask her out. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant near the harbor. We talked for hours about our dreams, our childhoods, our favorite books. The connection was immediate and powerful. By our 3rd date, I was already imagining a future with her. She was kind, intelligent, and had this ability to make everyone around her feel special. After 6 months of dating, I took her to Vermont for a weekend getaway. We hiked through autumn forests, the leaves a brilliant tapestry of reds and golds. Under a maple tree with the sun setting behind the mountains, I told her I loved her for the first time. When she said it back, I felt like the luckiest man alive. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed at our favorite restaurant, the same one where we had our first date. I had arranged with the owner to serve the ring with dessert. When Sarah found the diamond ring nestled beside her chocolate cake, her eyes filled with tears. She said yes before I could even finish asking the question. The entire restaurant erupted in applause. My relationship with my younger brother Jake had always been complicated. At 27, Jake had lived his entire life in my shadow, at least. That was how he saw it. Growing up, I excelled in school while Jake struggled. I won academic scholarships. Jake barely graduated. I built a successful career. Jake bounced between jobs, never finding his footing. These differences created a rift between us that widened with each passing year. Our childhood was marked by competition. Jake would destroy my science projects the night before presentations. I would find my homework torn up or my books damaged. When I made the baseball team, Jake told everyone I had cheated during tryouts. My parents never seemed to notice or care about this dynamic. In fact, they often praised Jake for the smallest achievements while taking my successes for granted. By adulthood, Jake was deep in debt, unemployed, and living in our parents' basement. He had developed a drinking problem and had a reputation for being unreliable. Yet somehow my parents continued to make excuses for him, sending him money and defending his behavior. Meanwhile, they rarely called to check on me unless they needed something. The only family member who saw through Jake was my sister Melissa. At 25, she was the peacekeeper in our family, always trying to mediate between Jake and me. She warned me multiple times about Jake, saying she did not trust his sudden interest in my wedding plans. I should have listened. Despite our troubled relationship, I asked Jake to be my best man. It was partly family obligation and partly a genuine desire to repair our relationship. Sarah thought it might be a healing experience for everyone. In retrospect, it was the worst mistake I could have made. The wedding preparations were extensive. Sarah and I bought a beautiful house near her school, planning for the future we would build together. We talked about having children after our first anniversary, maybe 2 or 3. Sarah wanted to take a year off teaching when the time came. I planned to scale back my hours at the firm to be a present father. We chose a historic hotel in downtown Boston for the ceremony and reception. Sarah found a stunning dress that made her look like she had stepped out of a fairy tale. My suit was custom, made a gift from my boss who had become a mentor over the years. Everything was perfect down to the last detail. As the wedding approached, Jake seemed more involved, offering to help with arrangements and suggesting vendors. At the time, I was touched by his apparent enthusiasm. I mistook his interest for support when it was actually reconnaissance for his plan. Jake wanted to organize a bachelor party, but I preferred something low-key. This led to our first disagreement about the wedding. Jake pushed for a wild weekend in Las Vegas. I insisted on a simple dinner with close friends. The argument escalated until Jake stormed out, claiming I thought I was too good for him. Melissa later told me he had complained to our parents, who called to suggest I was being too hard on him. Despite these tensions, I remained hopeful that the wedding would bring our family together. Sarah and I completed our registry, sent out invitations, and counted down the days. Her parents adored me, and they were thrilled to welcome me into their family. Everything was falling into place. We had no idea that Jake was plotting to destroy it all. The morning of our wedding dawned bright and clear. I woke up in my hotel suite filled with a mixture of excitement and nerves. My groomsmen arrived early to help me prepare, but Jake was nowhere to be found. I called him several times, each call going straight to voicemail. I tried not to let his absence affect my mood. This was going to be the happiest day of my life, and nothing could ruin it. How wrong I was. Sarah and I had planned a first look before the ceremony, a private moment to see each other before walking down the aisle. As I waited in the garden where our photographer had set up, I received a text from Sarah. She was postponing our meeting, no explanation given. A knot formed in my stomach, but I told myself she was probably dealing with last-minute details, or perhaps having an emotional moment with her parents. An hour later, my parents burst into my suite. Their faces were twisted with anger and disappointment. My father demanded to know what I had done. Before I could ask what he meant, Sarah's father appeared behind them, his normally kind face now hard as stone. He told me I was no longer welcome at the venue and that the wedding was off. I stood there in shock as they explained that Jake had gone to Sarah that morning with evidence of my infidelity. He had shown her text messages between me and a female colleague, messages that appeared flirtatious and inappropriate. He had hotel receipts showing I had booked rooms on nights I claimed to be working late. He even had photos of me with my arm around a woman at a company party, the images cropped to remove other colleagues standing with us. All of it was fabricated or manipulated, but the damage was done. Sarah, overwhelmed with evidence and emotional from the stress of the wedding, believed Jake without question. When I tried to call her, I discovered she had blocked my number. Her father threatened to call the police if I attempted to see her. I rushed to her suite only to be blocked by her bridesmaids, who hurled accusations at me. Through the door, I could hear Sarah sobbing. Her mother emerged briefly to tell me that I had destroyed their daughter and to never contact their family again. In a daze, I returned to my room to find Jake there, pretending to be concerned. He put his arm around me, saying how sorry he was that Sarah had discovered the truth. The way he said it, with a subtle smirk that only I could see, made everything click into place. I pushed him away and demanded to know what he had done. Jake feigned innocence, but when I grabbed his phone from the nightstand, he lunged for it. I was faster. There, in his messages, I found conversations with a friend about fabricating evidence. Screenshots of my text, conversations that had been edited, pictures of receipts that had been photoshopped. It was all there. When I confronted him, Jake dropped the act. He admitted everything, his face twisted with years of jealousy and resentment. He told me that I had everything while he had nothing, that Sarah deserved better than me, that he was tired of being second best. I was so enraged I nearly struck him. Instead, I took his phone and ran to find my parents. I showed them the evidence of Jake's deception, expecting them to be as outraged as I was. Instead, they accused me of fabricating evidence against Jake to cover my own misdeeds. My father suggested I was having a breakdown due to guilt. My mother cried about how I was trying to blame my innocent brother for my mistakes. The wedding venue was chaos. Guests were arriving to find the ceremony delayed, then canceled. Rumors spread quickly. Sarah's family told everyone I had been exposed as a cheater. My family, except for Melissa, who tried desperately to defend me, either believed the lie or pretended to for Jake's sake. By evening, I was escorted from the hotel by security, humiliated in front of 200 wedding guests. The deposit for the venue, the catering, the band, all lost. My relationship destroyed. My reputation in tatters. All because my brother could not stand to see me happy. As I drove away from what should have been my wedding, I saw Jake in the rearview mirror, standing with our parents, receiving comfort for the drama I had supposedly caused. That image would haunt me for years to come. The weeks following the wedding disaster were the darkest of my life. I fell into a depression so deep I could barely function. I took a 2-month leave of absence from work, unable to focus on blueprints and client meetings, when my personal life had imploded so spectacularly. The harassment was relentless. Sarah's friends bombarded my social media accounts with hateful messages. Anonymous emails arrived at my firm telling colleagues about my supposed infidelity. Clients I had good relationships with suddenly requested different architects for their projects. A major contract I had been working on for months was pulled without explanation. My apartment held too many memories of Sarah, her books on the shelves, the throw pillows she had chosen. The framed photos I could not bear to look at but also could not bring myself to remove. I would lie awake at night, replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering if there was something I could have done differently to make her trust me, more to make her question Jake's lies. I tried to explain the truth to Sarah through email, since she had blocked my number. I sent proof that the messages were fabricated hotel receipts that showed I was at work conferences with dozens of witnesses. Statements from the colleague Jake had implicated denying any inappropriate relationship. My emails went unanswered or returned with brief, painful responses asking me to stop contacting her. 3 months after the failed wedding, I made the decision to leave Boston. The house I had bought for our future had never been lived in. I sold it at a loss, packed what belongings I cared about, and applied for positions across the country. A respected architecture firm in Seattle offered me a senior position. I accepted without hesitation. The move across the country was both an escape and a new beginning. Seattle, with its moody skies and breathtaking landscapes, became my sanctuary. The constant rain matched my mood in those early months, but gradually, like the spring that eventually followed the Pacific Northwest winter, I began to heal. I found a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. Dr. Maxwell helped me process not just the loss of Sarah, but the deeper wound of my brother's betrayal and my family's failure to believe me. Our weekly sessions became an anchor as I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Through therapy, I also discovered a support group for people who had experienced similar betrayals. Listening to others share stories of deception by loved ones helped me feel less alone. I formed friendships within the group, particularly with Michael, who had been falsely accused of abuse by an ex-wife during a custody battle. He understood the helplessness of being disbelieved despite evidence to the contrary. My new colleagues at the architecture firm welcomed me without judgment. They knew nothing of my past, and I preferred to keep it that way. I threw myself into my work, taking on challenging projects and working long hours. The firm appreciated my dedication and innovation. Within a year, I was promoted to lead architect on several high-profile commercial developments. I occasionally checked Sarah's social media, a painful habit I struggled to break. I saw that she had transferred to a different school district. There were fewer posts, her online presence diminished like she was withdrawing from the world. A year after our non-wedding, I saw photos of her with a new boyfriend, a doctor, based on the comments. I closed the app and finally blocked her accounts, recognizing this digital self-torture needed to end. News about Jake came through Melissa, the only family member I stayed in contact with. Jake had convinced our parents to loan him money to open a small sports memorabilia shop. They had leveraged their retirement savings to fund his business, something they had never offered to do for me or Melissa. Jake became the golden child, the entrepreneur, while I was rarely mentioned in family gatherings. According to Melissa, Jake had spread additional rumors about me, suggesting there had been other women, other betrayals that Sarah had not known about. He positioned himself as the protective brother who had saved Sarah from a lifetime of heartbreak. Our extended family largely accepted this narrative, either because they believed it or because it was easier than questioning it. My healing process was gradual but steady. I bought a condo overlooking Puget Sound, the opposite of the family home Sarah and I had chosen. I took up mountain climbing, challenging myself on the peaks surrounding Seattle. I learned photography, capturing the wild beauty of the Olympic Peninsula and the North Cascades. These new passions gave me purpose beyond work and therapy. Each Christmas, Thanksgiving, and family birthday brought invitations from my parents to return home. Each time, I declined with brief, polite excuses. Melissa would visit me in Seattle instead, bringing news and staying for long weekends where we would explore the city and surrounding wilderness. She became my lifeline to the past, while also supporting my future. By the third year in Seattle, I had created a life I was proud of. I had a small circle of close friends, a job I excelled at, and a home that reflected my personal taste rather than compromises made with someone else. I had dated occasionally, nothing serious, still cautious about trusting someone with my heart again. I was not the same person who had stood heartbroken outside a Boston hotel 3 years earlier. That Bradley had been shattered by betrayal. This Bradley had been forged by adversity into someone stronger, more self-reliant, more discerning. I had not forgotten the past, but I had stopped allowing it to define my future. Little did I know, the past was about to come calling. It was just past midnight, on a Wednesday, when my phone rang. I had been working late on a design for an eco-friendly apartment complex, losing track of time as I often did when immersed in a project. Seeing Melissa's name on the screen at such an unusual hour sent a spike of anxiety through me. My sister never called this late unless something was wrong. I answered to hear Melissa's voice tense and hurried. She was speaking in a near whisper, like she was afraid of being overheard. Jake had been arrested for fraud. His sports memorabilia business had apparently been selling counterfeit signed items as authentic. But that was not why she was calling. Jake's girlfriend Amanda had come to Melissa with a recording. Jake, drunk and feeling guilty after his arrest, had confessed everything to Amanda. Not just about the fraudulent business, but about what he had done 3 years ago. Amanda, disgusted by the revelation, had secretly recorded the conversation on her phone. My heart pounded as Melissa played the audio for me. Jake's slurred voice filled my ear, boasting about how he had orchestrated the perfect crime. He had been in love with Sarah himself, had been since I first introduced them. He confessed to watching us, envying our relationship, planning for months how to tear us apart. He detailed how he had manipulated the evidence with his friend Tony, a graphic designer, who had altered the text messages and hotel receipts. He laughed about how easy it had been to convince Sarah, how she had been emotional and stressed about the wedding, ready to believe the worst. He bragged about turning our parents against me, ensuring I would have no support system. The most painful part was hearing him admit that he knew I had never cheated, had never even been tempted. He had targeted my loyalty and fidelity, turning them into weaknesses he could exploit. He knew Sarah's insecurities, her fear of being betrayed like her mother had been by her father. Jake had weaponized these vulnerabilities against both of us. When the recording ended, I sat in stunned silence. After 3 years, I finally had proof of what I had known all along. But instead of the vindication I might have expected, I felt hollow. This evidence came too late to save what I had lost. Melissa continued with more revelations. Jake's business partner had also come forward with evidence of his dishonest practices. Our parents had discovered that Jake had remortgaged their house, without their knowledge, to fund his failing business. The family was in financial ruin, and Jake was facing serious criminal charges. The news had spread throughout our extended family, and Sarah's family as well. Some believed the truth immediately. Others were hesitant, the narrative they had accepted for 3 years difficult to relinquish. My parents were devastated not just by the financial betrayal but by the realization that they had chosen the wrong son to support. Melissa begged me to come home to Boston. The family needed me, she said. Jake was in custody awaiting bail. Our parents were facing foreclosure. More importantly, Sarah had heard the recording. She had reached out to Melissa, asking if I would be willing to speak with her. I booked a flight for the following morning, taking emergency leave from work. The entire red-eye flight from Seattle to Boston, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Anger at Jake for stealing years of my life. Resentment toward my parents for their blind faith in him. Anxiety about facing Sarah again. And beneath it all, a strange sense of relief that the truth had finally emerged. Boston was colder than Seattle. The November air sharp with the promise of an early winter. Melissa met me at the airport, embracing me with tears in her eyes. She looked older, the stress of recent events evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. During the drive to our parents' house, she filled me in on the developments since our midnight call. Our childhood home looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling the garden untended. Inside, my parents had aged a decade in 3 years. My father, once robust and commanding, seemed diminished. My mother wept when she saw me clutching at my coat with desperate hands. They apologized through tears, their words rushing over each other in their urgency to make amends. I felt detached from their remorse, like I was watching a scene in a play rather than experiencing it firsthand. Their anguish was real, but it came too late. They had chosen to believe the worst about me without question. They had supported Jake while he destroyed my life. Some betrayals cut too deep for simple apologies to heal. The next morning I visited Jake at the county jail. He sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, his face haggard, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw me, he broke down sobbing apologies between gasping breaths. He claimed that jealousy had consumed him, that he had never intended for things to go so far. That once the lie began, he could not find a way to take it back without destroying himself. I listened without interruption, studying the brother I had once looked up to, trying to understand how he could have hated me enough to orchestrate such elaborate destruction. When he finished his tearful confession, I asked him the only question that mattered. Why Sarah? Why not target my job, my friends, anything else? His answer revealed the depth of his pathology. He had loved Sarah from the moment he met her. In his twisted mind, he believed that if I were out of the picture, she would eventually turn to him for comfort. He had planned to be there for her after the wedding collapsed, to be the supportive friend who would become more. But Sarah had cut off contact with the entire family, including him, destroying that fantasy. I left the jail with no sense of closure. Jake had apologized, but his remorse seemed centered on being caught rather than on the harm he had caused. I did not forgive him. I was not sure I ever could. Some bonds once broken cannot be repaired. That afternoon, I received a text from Sarah asking to meet at a coffee shop we used to frequent. My hands shook as I replied, agreeing to the meeting. After 3 years of imagining what I would say if given the chance, I suddenly found myself at a loss for words. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 untouched cups of coffee before her. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filling with tears. She had changed her hair, cut it shorter. There were fine lines around her eyes that had not been there before. But her smile, tentative as it was, remained the same. We talked for hours. She explained how devastating Jake's evidence had seemed, how she had been overwhelmed by stress and emotion. She admitted that deep down she had doubted the accusations, but the weight of the evidence and the pressure from her family had overridden her instincts. She had spent 3 years regretting not giving me the chance to explain. Sarah revealed she had broken up with the doctor 6 months earlier. She confessed that she had compared every man she met to me and found them all wanting. With tears streaming down her face, she asked if there was any chance for us to start again, to rebuild what Jake had destroyed. As I looked at her across the table, I recognized that I still cared for her. A part of me would always love the woman I had planned to marry. But too much had changed. We had become different people shaped by different experiences. The trust that had been broken could not simply be glued back together because the truth had finally emerged. In the weeks following my return to Boston, I faced decisions that would determine the course of the rest of my life. Sarah and I continued to meet cautiously, rediscovering each other as the people we had become. There was still a connection between us, a familiarity that was both comforting and painful. Each conversation revealed the depth of what we had lost. After much soul-searching, I realized I could not go back to what we had been. The Sarah who had believed the worst of me without giving me a chance to defend myself was not someone I could fully trust again. The Bradley who had been destroyed by that betrayal no longer existed. We had both changed too fundamentally. I explained this to her during a walk along the Charles River. She cried, but there was understanding in her eyes. She admitted that perhaps she had suggested reconciliation out of guilt rather than love, a desire to make amends rather than build a future. We parted with genuine affection and the acknowledgement that sometimes even love is not enough to overcome certain wounds. My relationship with Jake required different resolution. He was sentenced to 3 years for fraud, with additional charges related to forgery pending. Before returning to Seattle, I visited him one last time. I did not offer forgiveness, but I did offer understanding. His childhood in my shadow had warped his perception. His insecurities had festered into toxic jealousy. Recognizing the roots of his actions did not excuse them, but it helped me release some of the anger that had been poisoning me. I told Jake that when he was released, I would be willing to have limited contact if he committed to therapy and making amends. Not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying hatred would only continue to damage me. Setting boundaries while leaving the door slightly ajar for future healing seemed the healthiest path forward. My parents faced foreclosure on their home due to Jake's financial manipulations. Despite my lingering resentment, I could not let them lose everything in their retirement years. I worked with a financial advisor to establish a plan that would keep them in their home, while ensuring Jake could never access their assets again. Our relationship remained strained, but we began the slow process of rebuilding trust through consistent, honest communication. Melissa became the unexpected hero of our family story. Her courage in bringing the truth to light, her unwavering support during the darkest times, showed a strength I had not fully appreciated before. Our bond grew stronger, and I made sure she knew how much her loyalty meant to me. Returning to Seattle felt like coming home in a way Boston never had again. My condo, overlooking the water, my fulfilling job, the friends who had supported me without ever knowing the full story, all welcomed me back. I settled into my life with a new sense of peace, the ghosts of the past finally laid to rest. 6 months after the truth emerged, I met Katie at a charity auction for sustainable architecture. She was an environmental engineer with a quick wit and a passion for conservation. Our connection was immediate but different from what I had experienced with Sarah. It was steadier, more grounded. When I eventually shared my past with her, her response was not pity but admiration for my resilience. Katie never tried to erase my history or compete with my past. Instead, she helped me integrate those experiences into the man I was becoming. With her, I learned that vulnerability was not weakness but courage. That trust once broken could be rebuilt with the right person. That family could be chosen as well as born. The lesson I ultimately took from those painful years was not about betrayal but about resilience, about how the worst moments of our lives do not define us unless we allow them to, about how losing what we thought we wanted can sometimes lead us to what we truly need, about how forgiveness is not about absolving others but freeing ourselves. Life rarely follows the path we expect. The wedding day I had planned with such hope became instead the beginning of a different journey. The brother I had tried to love despite our differences became the architect of my greatest pain and, ironically, my eventual growth. The parents who should have supported me unconditionally became a lesson in setting boundaries and defining family on my own terms. I do not regret the man I have become through this crucible of betrayal and resurrection. Each crack in my foundation has been filled with gold, creating something stronger and more beautiful than before. Each relationship now comes with clearer boundaries and deeper appreciation. Each day is lived with the knowledge that happiness is not a destination but a continuous choice. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you loved, know that your story does not end with that betrayal. If you have ever had your truth questioned, know that time reveals what words cannot prove. If you have ever lost everything, know that what you rebuild can be more authentic than what came before. What would you do if you were in my position? Would you have forgiven Jake or Sarah? Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to positive change in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like this video if my story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and growth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to transform your own wounds into wisdom.